We are here, and I honestly think I'm going to cry on this one. This one is definitely a little more intimate and bearing. So let's get started. Ephesians 2:10. We are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. For the longest time, I've been a performer. I remember growing up in school, and this was middle school, really, maybe even elementary school now that I'm thinking about it, because in elementary school we had this singing group, and it's called Four Shades of Beauty, and it was four of us. And shouts out to anyone who may see this, who remember the song, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." And I went to a private school. I went to a Christian private school. I think that's where it all started for me. Not exactly sure when or how I developed this love for music and singing and performing, but I can remember it starting there. And then from there, I went on to middle school. And when I was in middle school, I remember I was new to the school, and it was me and this other young lady. And when we first got there, it was kind of, we clicked and we became best friends. And we also started a singing group. And this was in seventh or eighth grade. And so that's when I started to really move out of Christian faith-based type music and more into secular music. And that's also when I started doing a lot more writing and performing and recording. That is where I started writing not just music, but also screenplays and scripts and short stories. And so my love for the art really started when I was younger. I know that because I've just had this great imagination, right? To imagine these stories and imagine these characters. And now looking back, I got lost in those stories and characters in my mind. And at some points it was beautiful. And at other points now I can see how it had a negative impact on how I showed up, on how I approached many different things in my life socially. And so after middle school, going into high school, I still wrote in my free time, wrote short stories, but I was living them out. And I would write music. And I remember my boyfriend at the time, he introduced me to rap. So prior to high school, I was more so into singing. But my boyfriend in high school, he was really tough in the rap game. He really introduced me to some of what I would consider some of the legends, like your KRS-Ones, your Rakims, Wu-Tang. He really introduced me to that rap world, and not just rap as what, well, I don't even listen to a lot of it now, but not like the rap that we hear today. It was like storytelling, like your Talib Kweli's, your KRS-One's, great, phenomenal storyteller. Most Def, even Nas. So that was my introduction to rap, and I really took into it because for me, it was the combination of all things that I had been really doing. The writing songs, I should say, writing short stories and narratives, and really just putting them together. Rap was that. Over melodies, over beautiful melodies and hooks and double entendres and all of those things. And so coming out of high school, I really immersed myself into the music, and it started to really become a passion of mine. Outside of music, though, my life was really, I want to say, going in a direction that I didn't even realize it was going in. Aside from what was going on in my home, there were a lot of things that I was dealing with internally that I didn't even realize. But I would put it to the side, and I would show up, and I would really turn into a character. I would turn into whoever I needed to be in those moments. If I needed to be fierce, I would turn into fierce Leah. If I needed to be defender, superhero in my eyes, I would turn into that superhero. I had a lot of say. I had a lot of mouth on me. And in many ways, I was disrespectful because it didn't really matter whether you were an adult. I would speak my truth from my perspective on how I saw things, not realizing that my perspective was being shaped by my trauma, and not just my trauma, but the story I read into my trauma, if that makes sense. I showed up not really my true self. And then I would come to understand that the and further I walked out life, it felt like I was walking away from who I truly am, who God created me to be. If I could put it in fewer words, I felt like it wasn't safe, nor was it acceptable to show up as I truly felt in those moments. And so I put on whatever face and whatever character I needed to be. And I was great at it because I had this gift for writing and I had this great imagination. And so I pretended my life and my reality was something that truly wasn't. So I started working in corporate, and I remember my mom being so proud. She was so proud when I got my job. So she was really proud and really just excited because we were working for the same company. And I remember doing well in that company, but I love music. Music was my passion, writing and performing it. And I'm giving you all of this context really because it lends itself to the fuller, bigger picture. At this producer, he was into film, and he had asked me to audition for this short film that he was working on. It wasn't a short film, it was a film that he was working on. And I was going back and forth, and I finally said yes. And that was my first experience really acting in a feature length film. And I loved it. It was just like, wow. It was so awesome. Really got my wheels turning in my head on how real what I'm writing and what I'm imagining, how tangible it could be. And then from there, I would go on to do theater productions, stage plays, a few commercials. I was really heavy into the acting. And I also started hosting open night mics and jam sessions, and really got to meet a lot of musicians as well, musicians that have been on tours and are going on tours and touring now. It was just a really good time for me because that was my passion coming to life. And I was juggling that with this corporate job. And I remember my mom being so excited. And I remember having this sense of not wanting to let her down, not wanting to disappoint her. And so, even though my passion, what gave me life in that moment during that time was the arts, I knew my mom was very much against the arts, but she saw it more so as a hobby and not something that I should pursue because it wasn't a real job. My mom was like, baby, you got gifts, you got talents, but you need to get you a real job, right? I don't know that she was against it, but I know that she didn't understand a lot of what I would do, like me going to New York, going to theater, me being in the studios till 2 o'clock in the morning, 3, 4, 7 o'clock sometimes, me, through all of those things. And so I knew she didn't understand that. And it really triggered something in me. I wrote about this in a book too. I felt like coming from Philly out to the county, which is where my mom moved. I felt like it was a big adjustment for me. Really a lot of me trying to find my tribe. Whew, it was really a lot of me. And I say that now because to emotion now, because I still in a sense felt like I I've been trying to find my tribe. Um, we'll get to that. We'll get that. This will probably be a two-parter. And quite honestly, in full transparency, there was nothing that anyone else said that made me feel this way. This was just me reading into it, because I felt so different. I didn't feel like I fit in. And so, in order to fit in, I felt like I had to audition, I had to perform, I had to show up a certain way. I had to pretend I had certain things that I didn't have materially, but also, you know, just mindset, right? It's nothing like pretending to have a mindset that you really truly don't have. Wow. I was really just trying to find my way around, until I found a circle of women, girls, then that if I'm being 100% transparent, I still felt like I had to perform with. I still felt like I couldn't show up, um, and my true self. I felt like I needed to fit in. And the interesting thing about that is that my son is going through that now. He's going through this phase where he's entering into high school next year, and he's finding himself having to balance showing up one way with a certain group of people and then showing up a different way with another group of individuals. And so I remember having a conversation with him and letting him know, and reminding him that he doesn't have to tone switch. He doesn't have to switch up. He can be who he is truly and honestly, and both in all areas of his life with all circles of friends. And they're either going to accept him or they aren't. And that's okay if they don't. And I remember praying and asking for prayer for that, for his identity. And the Lord reminded me that this is familiar. You went through this too. As I got older and as I started to develop in a true passion for music and the arts, and I started to resent myself for not walking in what I was truly passionate about for the sake of making her proud. And it was like I was dying inside, but my actions were perceivably bringing her life. And then I lost my job in corporate. And so I took that as the opportunity to go 100% hard in music, because I had unemployment. So I had money coming in, but unemployment don't last long, right? And so I remember my mom saying, you take this time, because I'm still living with her. She's saying, you take this time to see what this music thing, because that's what she called it, music thing, will do for you. And then when that unemployment runs out, or I forget if it was when the unemployment ran out or if it was just a time frame, but when the money stopped rolling in, you better go out there and get you a real job. My mom was complaining about the real job. So I do that. I meet my son's father. And I really got a good upfront view of what music industry is really all about. And I remember, being in this place where I got to make it. I got to make it. I got to make it. So whatever I got to do, I'm going to do. If I got to put on and develop this persona, I'm going to put on and develop this persona because folks are looking, and I want to get signed. I want to get accepted. I want to be able to do these things. So I was willing to really do whatever I needed to do to make it, whatever make it was. And I really truly thought that, I think for me, making it was being this big superstar, performing on stages. And so that required a lot of performing, but I had a knack for performing because I had already had the background. I had the imagination for writing these short stories and narratives and creating these characters and developing them. It was the perfect opportunity for me. And I did a lot of performing. I found myself in many of groups, singing groups. I found myself on many stages performing music as well as acting. And I was in heaven. You couldn't tell me that I wasn't living out my dreams. You couldn't tell me that I wasn't living out what I was purposed to do. You could not tell me that. And then I got pregnant. And during that period of time, I also didn't realize that I was seeking validation. I was seeking acceptance a lot. I was seeking approval, not just from my mom then at that point, but also approval of the producers, approval of the execs, the music execs, approval of um, just fans, quote unquote, audience, my peers in the music industry. I was really seeking approval and acceptance and validation. And because I was willing to do whatever needed to be done, and I was willing to show up as whoever I needed to show up as, or this character, this persona, my self-esteem was taking a blow every time I turned around. My confidence, though I was on the stage performing, that was really the only time I had confidence, was when I was on the stages performing. It was a false confidence because when I was on the stages performing, I wasn't on the stages performing as Leah. I had so many different names, stage names. And even now I'm thinking about it off the stage, hanging out with my girlfriends during that time, we had fake names. Had so many different personas, so many different identities, um, that I didn't even realize none of that was going on at the time. I was just going with the flow. And I realized, though, that that was where my confidence and my esteem lied, on those stages, in those personas, and under the validation and acceptance of men.